My amendment specifically today, it relates to this, specifically Lake Okeechobee, where there are U.S. Army Corps of Engineer personnel, uniformed personnel stationed, so uniformed soldiers that on a yearly basis are being poisoned by what's in this jar. This jar is well beyond the threshold of what the EPA did a study, determined was poisonous, 8 parts per billion microcystin algae. This measured early this summer, before things got really bad, about 865 parts per billion. Study also spoke specifically of the fact that this would remain as an airborne toxin for a distance of up to 10 miles. If you're curious about the half-life on something like this, obviously it's it's going to linger in the air much longer at a level of 865 parts per billion than at a level of 8 parts per billion. To talk about how greatly people are affected by this, there's not a great number of U.S. Army personnel that are affected by this, but those that are affected greatly. They're surrounded by this for literally hundreds of yards around the lock and dam structures that they work at on Lake Okeechobee, 5 separate locations around Lake Okeechobee where they will become surrounded by this all summer long. The amendment would specifically ask a couple of things, recognizing that it becomes, the EPA says it's toxic at a level of 8 parts per billion, that being the threshold mark for saying that uniformed personnel would receive a hazardous duty pay for their work 8-10 hours a day, sitting on top of this, breathing it in, which is unbearable. I could tell you, I could open it up for you if you want to know how unbearable it is. Stays on your clothes, comes out of your skin as you're taking a shower in the hours thereafter. And then in addition to receiving a hazardous duty for those personnel stationed around it, having something go in their file that denotes their exposure to this toxin that, as noted medically, will lead to Alzheimer's, kidney failure, liver failure, as well as a number of other hazards that the list could go on and on and on. I spent my career as a bomb technician in ordnance, and I would say this as something literal. If this was something that was in a 155 millimeter round projectile that was fired out towards an enemy or fired back at us, guys like me would have to go out there in mop suits, determine a vector for where the wind was blowing and what direction something like this was going to go, how the communities around that would be affected, and we're letting our service members get poisoned by this for 8-10 hours a day every single year. There was an issue that came up where T&I asked to have jurisdiction over military personnel hazardous duty pays, and I don't want some kind of backroom deal going on here where this is going to, as much as I love transportation and infrastructure, I sit on that committee. I haven't been given the opportunity to handle military personnel issues there on T&I. If that's going to be the case, then I would assume that we're going to get to start handling military personnel issues also for Coast Guard and other agencies. So I think there's another question that's at play here. I'm not the only one that thinks that. The parliamentarian, I'll submit this for the record to you guys, also noting from the parliamentarian that they say that this is germane to the NDAA as it is a military personnel and pay issue. I thank you all for the time. Happy to answer any questions.